We're less than a week away from Halloween. And I have some Halloween parties to go to, and I was looking for some political costume ideas. Do you guys have any ideas for politics-inspired Halloween costumes?
Oh, God. I feel like the election coming up has just totally overshadowed Halloween.
It's spooky itself.
Yeah.
It'd be fun if you could come up with a way of attending as the AI version of one of the candidates, since so much of what we see now is the AI version of them.
Maybe like an extra finger or something.
Right. The superhero version of Donald Trump.
Welcome to the campaign moment on this Friday, October 25th. I'm Elahe Izadi, co-host of Post Reports. Aaron Blake, my usual co-host and author of the Campaign Moment newsletter, is unfortunately out sick. But fortunately this week, I'm joined by Trisha Thadani, a technology reporter at The Post. Hey, Trisha.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we also are lucky to have here Michael Scherer, one of our amazing national political reporters at The Post. Hey, Michael.
Great to be back.
So we're talking right now on Friday morning, and I wanted to talk to both of you because you have both been reporting a lot on this one person who is very powerful and has also been playing a very big role in this election. And that person is Elon Musk. And before we get into all of that, we are less than 2 weeks away from the election, and there's just so much campaign news going on. So I did want to mention some of that news. First, a former swimsuit model is sharing newly detailed allegations against former President Donald Trump. This is Stacey Williams, and she said that Trump groped her in the early 1990s. Trump's spokesperson has completely denied this allegation. Also this week, Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, came out and called Trump a fascist. The retired Marine general told the New York Times that his former boss would express admiration for Hitler and, quote, certainly prefers the dictator approach to government. And now this is a comment that Vice President Kamala Harris has really jumped on. She also called Trump a fascist during a CNN town hall on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Harris is trying to, drum up support. She's out campaigning with celebrities. She has a rally Friday with Beyonce. I always have a question as to how much that matters, but she's out there with all these celebrity endorsers. So now let's get into the reason we have both Michael and Trisha, both of you here, and that is to talk about Elon Musk. Musk, people may know, is the founder of companies like SpaceX. He owns X, formerly Twitter. And he's the world's richest man. And over the last few months, he has become increasingly central to Trump's campaign. He's actually overseeing door knocking in some swing states. So we're going to get into all that and also just how unusual it is for one powerful businessman to insert himself into a campaign and play such a big role like this. So Trisha, you're based out of San Francisco. You cover Musk and the tech world. That's your terrain. So I wanted to start by asking you, why is Elon Musk so consumed by this election and specifically in helping get Donald Trump elected?
Yeah, as you had mentioned, it's quite remarkable to have somebody with both the clout and the power and the money as Elon Musk to be throwing so much of his support, time, money, and effort behind a candidate like this. Some of the major reasons for his support are pretty clear. So back in the spring, when he was forming a super PAC that, as you had mentioned, is overseeing a lot of the door-knocking efforts in battleground states, he had told people that he wants to support Trump because of his stances on crime and immigration and issues like that. And beyond that, a lot of his support is also ideological. We've seen Musk, he's sort of railed against the so-called woke mind virus, which he feels Trump also has disdain for. And then also beyond that, the big elephant in the room is how much money Musk has tied up with the federal government. Some of his big businesses, SpaceX and Starlink, potentially can gain tremendous contracts under a Trump administration. And Starlink is a global satellite internet company that's run by Musk. So a lot of that support is also financial.
And when did he get so involved? When did that start?
So he really started getting involved in earnest publicly in the last couple of months. But through reporting from us and other major outlets, we've really started to see the seeds of that a bit earlier on. So reporting from the Wall Street Journal, for example, revealed that he was a big financial supporter of DeSantis's campaign.
This is the current Florida governor.
Right, who was running earlier this year. So, his support does go back. And then we also, through reporting, learned that this spring, he had formed a super PAC to support Trump, and now today we know is one of the largest independent get-out-the-vote efforts for the Republican candidate. So there's been seeds of this planted over, about the last year, but really we've seen Musk come out in earnest in the last couple of months.
Michael, Trisha mentioned this super PAC that Musk is supporting. Can you tell me a little bit about it? What's it called? What is the super PAC doing?
It's called America PAC. It's one of 3 or 4 different groups that the Trump campaign has said it's going to rely on to do what traditionally is done by the Republican Party. There is still a get-out-the-vote, door-knocking, phone texting effort being run by Trump and Republican parties in these key states, but it's much smaller than it's been in the past. They defunded a lot of that when Trump took over the RNC at the beginning of the year, and they said basically we're going to rely more on outside groups. And I think that was one of the impetuses for groups like America PAC to pop up. And so one of the things Musk has done as he's sort of come out publicly as a very political player is to throw lots of money. I mean, we just got a campaign filing disclosure this week that showed in just a couple of weeks, Musk had put in another $44 million.
Oh, my gosh.
Into that PAC, bringing his total up to about $118 million. At the rate that he is spending, he could end this cycle. We won't know until after the election, as the biggest donor to super PACs, to the type that actually publicly report their money. And we don't know what else he's given to C4s and other groups that can spend on politics without disclosing the donors.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful here, at least for me, to do a little bit of like a campaigning and elections 101. Can you just, Michael, remind us the difference between a super PAC and like a regular PAC? Like, how is it that Elon Musk can just put all this money into this entity?
A super PAC is an independent group not associated with a campaign or political party that can raise or spend unlimited amounts of money to influence an election directly, to support or oppose a candidate. So it's an outside group that is not effectively regulated beyond having to disclose their donors at some point by the normal campaign finance system.
But they can take unlimited amount of money.
Yeah, they can take a check for $10 billion, $20 billion, doesn't matter, $1. And they can spend just as much. Whereas campaigns and candidates are restricted, right now to basically, a few $1,000s from any individual.
So it stands to reason that Donald Trump is definitely benefiting from America PAC, this super PAC backed by Elon Musk.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, it's also important to note, Elon Musk has a lot of wealthy friends and has a really big network. And so earlier this summer, we had seen some of those people pour money into the super PAC as well. So that included like a former Tesla board member, also Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, Sequoia Capital investor Sean McGuire. So, the fact that Elon Musk is involved is also attracting a lot of his, wealthy, well-networked network.
Yeah, his wealthy friends. Trisha, let's talk about what this work looks like on the ground, America PAC. I know that you recently went out with an America PAC canvasser, as we talked about. This super PAC is doing a lot of the door knocking on behalf of, maybe not directly for the Trump campaign, but definitely in support of him. Can you tell me, Trisha, who are the people canvassing for this PAC, and what was it like when you were out with them?
Yeah, so earlier this month, I traveled to Waukesha County in Wisconsin, and I met a canvasser named Eliza McMillan, who's a 31-year-old, very passionate Trump supporter. And so she was working with the America PAC that day, and she started in North Carolina, then traveled to Wisconsin, and then has also done some canvassing work in Georgia. So she was kind of representative of the typical canvasser. So I connected with her about the America PAC when she was in Wisconsin, and I really wanted to just get a look at okay, Elon Musk has all of this name recognition. He's pouring all this money into it. So what does this physically look like on the ground? My biggest takeaway, actually, was I was pretty amazed at how low-tech this whole operation was. And I guess that is also, kind of par for the course for door knocking. It's a very traditional way of getting out the vote.
Yeah, like in person, old school, go up and talk to a human.
Yeah, it was incredibly old school. And I guess, the only reason I had really felt that way is because of that juxtaposition of this being something that is funded by like this technological genius, Elon Musk. And here we are, I'm seeing this canvasser like deal with an app that kept glitching. She's getting doors slammed in her face. So this app had integrated voter information for the doors that the vendor that the PAC was contracting with had deemed worth Alicia knocking on. What was really interesting to see was just how much frustration throughout the day the app was causing Alicia. And again, this was just really notable because of that juxtaposition of this being, part of an operation that is run by Elon Musk. It's also worth noting, Alicia has had some tensions with the PAC recently. She has had disputes with them over how much she was paid and how many hours she was working. And as of recently, she's no longer working with the PAC.
And then can you tell me about, when she knocked on the door of someone, what was that interaction like?
In this particular neighborhood that we were in a town called New Berlin, at least in the few hours that I was out with her, we really got a mix of voters. So first of all, it was more often than not, people wouldn't answer the door. The few times that they did, we came across a mix of Harris voters, swing voters, and just a couple of Trump voters. So it was this interesting microcosm into sort of like the indecision of voters in this particular suburb in Wisconsin. So Alicia's main thing when she was talking to people was, one, to ensure they were voting for Trump, and two, that they were going to go and vote early. So Don Marks was somebody who fit both of those qualifications.
Hey, how are you today?
Good.
Good. My name is Alicia, and I'm here on behalf of the America PAC, seeing if you're voting for President Trump this upcoming election day.
And in fact,
Awesome. You're going to vote election day or early?
early.
After him and Alicia had spoke, and Alicia had mentioned that, each time she would come across a Trump voter and they were engaging with her, she would be like, oh, did you know Elon Musk is behind this PAC? Very much dropping his name as name recognition. And so when Alicia went back to her car after talking to Don Marks and getting all the information, I hung back to actually ask him a little bit more about what he had thought about Elon Musk.
I guess I'm glad he finally, that the Republicans got somebody with money behind them on their side to do stuff that the Democrats have been doing for the last couple of elections.
Yeah. And do you have any personal feelings about Musk sort of
I
getting
like
into?
him.
Yeah,
I like Musk. He's a brilliant guy, but eccentric.
Yeah.
So it's...
And he had reflected what I'd heard from other voters that day of, it's not like so groundbreaking to them that somebody like Elon Musk is involved, but it is nice to have somebody like him who has the clout, who has the money to be on, quote, their side.
One of the remarkable things about what Elon's doing now is making this about Elon in a way that other big donors just don't. Most of the top donors to politics right now are not household names. You don't know who Miriam Adelson is or Richard Uihlein. These aren't names that pop out. Mike Bloomberg, you kind of know, gives a lot of money to Democrats, but you don't see him doing events in Pennsylvania. And what Musk has done is really made himself a surrogate for the campaign. He's been on his campaign swing through Pennsylvania, doing events. They seem to be very tightly controlled. He's tried to get press for himself, doing this $1 million giveaway. If you sign his petition, he says he's giving $1 million. We can talk about the legality of that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
And on top of that, I think he owns, one of the major social media platforms. He's regularly spreading falsehoods or misleading information online. And further, and I think this is important, the Trump campaign has embraced this. A lot of the fundraising that's been going out this week has been, give money now and enter a sweepstakes to get a black Make America Great Again hat like the one Elon Musk wore at a rally recently. And it's just sort of unheard of that, literally the richest man in the world whose net worth went up more than $20 billion this week because Tesla stock took a jump, is becoming such a major force in politics and is really pushing the boundary of what someone with lots of money can do.
Yeah, but I also think an interesting point on that is that it's kind of a new thing, like within the last couple of weeks to a month, that Musk is really the face of this PAC. When it was initially formed in the spring, some folks who were familiar with the initial meetings had told me that like the initial vendors were not told who was funding this whole effort until like a day before the meeting in Musk's apartment. So he very much, like in the beginning, was not attaching his name to this. And it's only just in the last couple of weeks where, he's revamped. The website has been revamped to have his picture at the top. He's been speaking at these, and he's been like speaking at these rallies and stuff. So it very much started out with like kind of Musk sort of secretly in the background putting this together, and now he's really made it about himself, as Michael said.
Yeah. Well, Trisha, I'm wondering, we're talking about all this money that Elon Musk has poured into this super PAC, but I'm curious, the money that he's spending, what is it buying him? So what's your overall impression of the group after being on the ground, walking around with this canvasser and going door to door with her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this super PAC has had kind of a lot of fits and starts, I would say, over the last couple of months since it was formed in the spring. And, it's been sort of subject to Musk's erratic leadership style that we've seen him run his other companies like X and Tesla with, where, there's these sudden pivots, there's mass firings when he's not satisfied with things. So we've seen a similar leadership style with this PAC as well. So for example, in July, as these vendors for both canvassing and his digital operations were just really ramping up their work, we have reporting that Musk was not satisfied with the pace at which they were going. So then suddenly they were all cut and let go. We saw a similar thing happen in September with another major vendor who was responsible for hiring canvassers in swing states. So there has been a couple of times in this PAC short history where they've suddenly had to start basically from scratch in certain states. And so that has led to a lot of questions of like how effective it will ultimately be. And, and that's also particularly interesting because this is really Musk's first and most visible foray into politics. But what we've seen so far and, learned through both public filings and sourcing is that, this effort is really focused on door-knocking operations. And this also fits with...
So not like TV ads and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the bulk of the spending of this PAC is going into this get out the vote operation. And then a smaller portion is going to direct mailers, pamphlets that are showing up at people's doors, and also radio and social media ads as well.
I'm just wondering, what does this all mean for the Trump campaign, Michael? Like what Trisha's telling you about what she learned on the ground and just also what we're learning more and more about how the health of this super PAC.
We won't know until Election Day, and then even after that, it'll take some time. I mean, what we do know is that Harris is a much better funded operation, both on the outside of her campaign and inside her campaign. She's spending far more money on ads. She has a far more sophisticated and large volunteer door-knocking operation. Paid door-knocking, which is what we're talking about here, is a really costly, difficult thing to manage, because what you're essentially doing is you're hiring temporary workers at not great salaries to travel often to states they don't live in and training them to do something that is really tedious and difficult. And so turnover is very high. But we also know that it can work. It can have an effect. And in a situation in which, one campaign that on the Democratic side is so much larger in terms of its get out the vote operation, and I'm not just counting the campaign itself, but this giant network of left-leaning groups that are also doing this. I think it very well could have an effect. And I think also that, honestly, like the final weeks of a campaign are about attention. It's about getting your candidates' ideas and face and a message in the brains of voters who have not yet decided, who are basically people who aren't paying attention, who have not paid attention for the last year. And so I think Musk has had some success doing that. I mean, giving regular people $1 million every day, in a program that's dubiously legal, gets a lot of attention and could have a real effect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's take a break here. There's so much more to talk about, including a little bit more about this $1 million prize that Musk has dangled in front of people, and also just the wider world of super PACs in this election. We'll be right back. So, Michael, you've mentioned this $1 million prize that America PAC has offered. And this is the idea that America PAC, this is Elon Musk's PAC, would give $1 million to someone every day until the election with some conditions. Michael, you mentioned dubious legality. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah. So to explain it, you got to go back to the beginning of the country.
Okay.
We have time.
All the way back.
Yeah. George Washington's reelection, they would buy out bars. You voted, you got a drink.
Oh, wow.
And so there is a long tradition in the United States of basically paying people or giving people things of value in exchange for their vote. Now, over time, laws have been set up that basically make the direct exchange of something of value for a vote or a voter registration a crime.
So this is like, I remember like if I wanted to get like on election day, if you show up with the I voted sticker, you can get a free cup of coffee kind of a thing?
Yes, you can't
do that.
You can't do that. Ben & Jerry's had a program a while ago where if you had voted that day, you got a free ice cream. That wasn't legal because they had to make the free ice cream available to everyone. So if Ben & Jerry's wants to give free ice cream away on election day to everyone who comes in, that's totally legal. But you cannot say because you've taken an action, you're going to get a reward. Now, what that means in practice is that there's tons of Democratic groups out there giving away tons of stuff. I mean, there have been like backpack giveaways in Philadelphia in which they give away the backpack and they talk about how cool voter registration is. They don't say you have to. You get the backpack no matter what. There have been lots of places, that both the campaign and outside groups are holding parties in big cities. NBA teams are holding parties in big cities near early voting centers. Just get people excited about voting. You don't have to vote. You get to come to the party anyway.
And this is just
musical performance.
to vote, not like to vote for a person.
That's right. It's just to vote. Yeah, these are technically nonpartisan, but they tend to happen in Democratic areas.
Okay.
So Musk has taken that template and pushed it further because what he has said is you can get money for signing this petition. The petition just says, I support the First and the Second Amendment, free speech and right to bear arms. If you sign the petition, you give me your information, you can get money, but also you get entered into a sweepstakes if you're a registered voter to win $1 million a day. Now, the fine point there is if you're a registered voter. And there are plenty of campaign finance attorneys who will say that makes it illegal. And we had this week the Department of Justice sending a letter to America PAC saying what you're doing does not follow the law. We're warning you that you could be liable for prosecution going forward because you're requiring as a barrier to entry here being a registered voter. America PAC has not been speaking publicly about their defense here. They appear to not be backing down from this program. But there are a number of defenses that have been raised by other people. And this could end up in court months later. It's very hard to foresee a Trump Justice Department pursuing prosecution of one of Trump's biggest donors. So it's a tricky legal space. One of the defenses is to say, look, it just happens that they're registered voters. It just happens that they're living in these states. There's no transaction here for the registration. And then there's also this other very strange argument that could be made, which is that Musk has said at these events, when people get the $1 million check, there's one thing I require of you to accept the check. You have to become a spokesman for us, which suggests that this may not be a straight sweepstakes, a straight lottery. It may be an employment relationship, which could also complicate things. Generally speaking, in election law, you can get away with a ton. Like most of the rules that are common sense, straightforward rules you think you can't do, you can push those rules and then wait 6 months, a year after the election to see whether the FEC rules against you or prosecutors come after you.
And then by then it doesn't matter because you're already moved on. The election's over.
That's right.
So while we wait to see the legality of this sweepstakes, Trisha, I mean, this is $1 million a day of Musk's own money?
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty good deal for just signing a petition and registering to vote, right? And yeah, I mean, to me, legality aside, it really just shows how much Musk is trying to gain attention in his whole effort of supporting Trump. I mean, this is also a stunt, right? When there's winners announced, they were, blasting it all over social media with flashy videos. So it's both a stunt and also just shows how deep Musk's pockets are and how much money he has to throw around for his preferred candidate.
I would just mention one other thing. I think this is, depending on how this goes, this could be opening the door on an entirely new way of doing campaigns in the United States.
The sweepstakes thing? specifically?
You have to think of it this way. Right now, the campaign's being run in 7 states. That's about 20% of the population. In those 7 states, and the numbers are disputed, but
because these are the swing states. These are the ones that are going to determine the election.
That's right. The other 43 states, we kind of know who's going to win.
Sorry, you don't matter.
Yeah, the electoral votes are baked in. The 7 states matter. You got 20% of the population you're talking about. Now, in each of those states, it's probably 80% knew months ago exactly what they would do, whether they would vote, whether they wouldn't vote, and who they would vote for if they were voting. And they were never going to move from that. And so you're talking about 20% of 20%. And, you talk to the Trump campaign, they have basically 10 million or 11 million targeted persuadable voters in these states. Mm-hmm. Now imagine a scenario in which, so you're going to have 2 campaigns here spend somewhere close with outside groups a couple $1 billion to persuade, again, this is back of the envelope, so don't hold me to these numbers, but say it's 10 million or 20 million Americans on what to do. What if you get to a situation in which a guy like Musk can just come in and say, okay, well, we'll give each one $10,000 and we'll figure out a way to make it legal, or we'll give each one $20,000. We'll make it a lottery. You sign my petition. You fit these qualifications. We know you're one of these 20% of 20% of voters. Because of the quirks of our democracy right now, where so few voters that are so easily identifiable will decide the outcome of this election, the ability to directly transfer money to them opens a whole kind of Pandora's box of possibilities. And we'll see how this develops. I mean, the law could change, courts could step in. But I do think we're seeing something different happen here with someone of Musk's net worth stepping in and saying so directly, I'm giving little checks to thousands of people for signing my petition. I'm giving very large checks to, a couple dozen people for being a part of this. Mm-hmm. Just imagine what in 4 years very wealthy people can come up with to replace that.
And Trisha, that, Michael raising this idea of it could be another person doing it in a different way and what this door could open to many more possibilities. It also leads me to wonder what's in store for Elon Musk's political future? Like him getting involved in this way so overtly and putting so much of his own money. I know he's the richest man in the world, but it's still a lot of money. He's choosing to spend it this way and he's associating himself very overtly with Trump now. What do you know, or what do you think about his own future in politics?
Yeah, I mean, he's spent, to the tune of $118 million. I mean, to Musk, that's really not that much.
That's like a Tuesday?
Yeah, that's a Tuesday. Maybe even just like a Tuesday before lunch.
Oh, wow.
But, this man, he has like this vast empire and, he's spending $118 million, I mean, at least as much as we know, into getting Trump elected. I mean, Musk could stand to gain so much more from that. When it comes to, like I had mentioned earlier, he has billions of dollars worth of contracts tied up with the federal government between SpaceX and Starlink. And even beyond just contracts, Elon Musk's company, Tesla in particular, has had kind of a rough time in the last couple of years under the Biden administration. There's been investigations, there's been regulatory hurdles with his big effort to get an autonomous vehicle on the road. And Musk has really been staking the future of Tesla on being able to get a fully autonomous robotaxi for sale in the next couple of years. And so, the future of his business hinges on that. And it seems like he's really placing a bet here of, if Trump wins, in theory, he'll have a much easier regulatory path for, his ambitions with his companies. And then even more directly, Trump has said repeatedly that he would appoint Musk to this so-called Government Efficiency Commission if he's elected. And Musk has also said that he would be excited and willing to serve on such a thing. And so that commission, we don't have too many details about it, but what has been said publicly is that this commission would really be focused on, for lack of a better term, just trimming the fat in government, looking at where there can be more efficiencies, which also means, where can there be firings, what sort of programs and departments and agencies can use some trimming. And to some folks that we've spoken to, they're really concerned about that, of having somebody like Elon Musk, who has so much tied up with the government, has so much at stake, getting such a position like that where he would, in theory, have so much control over who's fired, who's hired, et cetera.
I would just add to that Trump's politics are distinguished by their transactional nature. He's not a very ideological guy, but he has made clear time and time again that if you do something to help him, he's very willing to help you, even if the help in return, breaks convention. Goes outside the bounds. We reported months ago on a clip where he was in front of a bunch of oil executives, basically saying, "You guys got to give me $1 billion because I'm going to give you this," which is something most politicians would never say.
They just infer it.
Yeah, they would infer, but for Trump, it's very different. I mean, you have Trump right now out there, threatening the broadcast licenses of networks who haven't covered him the way he wants to be covered, which is ironic given Elon Musk's focus on, resisting government censorship. But, I think that's another distinguishing feature here. This is someone with enormous government interests, government contracts, government regulatory interests, and he is giving money and talking regularly with a candidate who very well could be president, who very well could reward those behaviors quite directly.
And what's so fascinating about this is that this relationship wasn't always so rosy and collaborative. Going back to 2016, Elon Musk had said publicly that Trump doesn't have the character to be president. And then, a few years later in 2022, he had said that, Trump should just hang up his hat and sail into the sunset. And then also on the other end, Trump has also mocked Musk before. He's making fun of his driverless cars that crash and, making fun of his rockets that are going to nowhere. So these two have had a bit of a history. And so the fact that the relationship has progressed in this way is really interesting and notable.
Given we are this last full week before the election, the last question I have for both of you is, what are you going to be paying attention to in this last full week?
Yeah, I'll be pretty deeply focused on Musk and his rhetoric. He's recently been speaking at rallies. So, what kind of things is he saying? What messaging is he putting forth to people? And what Michael had mentioned earlier is on his platform X in particular of how he's using that as a megaphone for Trump. And Musk has a massive following on here as well, 200 million people, and has a tremendous reach. And not only is it been a megaphone for Trump, but it's also been a huge vector of misinformation that has been allowed to spread unchecked. And so I'll really be keeping an eye on that, seeing just how far these claims are able to spread and what exactly the real world impact of that is as well.
Michael?
I think a lot of the closing weeks of elections are about momentum. And we have had what distinguishes this cycle from other cycles is that the amount of undecided, the amount of movement is so minimal. We basically had a static race for about a month now. Almost no movement. The polls can't really distinguish what's happening because of the margin of error, and any movement that's happening is happening within the margin of error. There is still in the polls, a small single-digit percentage of people who are undecided. There are definitely also a small single-digit or maybe even larger percentage of people who say they're going to vote but may not vote, or, vice versa, say they're not going to vote but might be convinced to vote. And those decisions are going to be made in the next, less than 2 weeks. And a lot of that will depend on who's in their head at the moment. So I think the thing to watch over the next 2 weeks is, who are you thinking more about? Whose message are you receiving more about? Either, controversial, negative, positive, because I think that can cause, the sort of late break shift. And this is a razor edge election. Like we say that often in this business that we don't know who's going to win. But I've never covered an election where the polling has been so consistently tied, like literally tied for so long that we really don't know. We really don't know how this is going to break.
Oh my gosh, so much to track. Thankfully, we have both of you to do it. That's it for today's episode. Thanks, Trisha.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks also, Michael, for joining us.
Thank you.
Before we sign off, a couple of hours after we recorded this conversation, the Washington Post announced its editorial page will not be making an endorsement in this presidential cycle. This is the first time it won't do so in more than 30 years. The Post's publisher and CEO in a column described this as a return to the paper's roots, when the Post did not regularly endorse presidential candidates. The Post's opinion and news staff operate independently from one another. And according to reporting by the Post's newsroom, sources say the editorial board had drafted a Harris endorsement. The decision to no longer endorse presidential candidates was made by Jeff Bezos, the billionaire owner of the Post and founder of Amazon. This is what we know as of Friday afternoon. And this comes days after a different billionaire newspaper owner at the Los Angeles Times blocked a Harris endorsement there. Aaron Blake, my co-host, will be back next week. In the meantime, check out his newsletter. It's also called The Campaign Moment, and you can find a link to it in our show notes and at postreports.com. Trisha Thadani is a technology reporter for The Post, and Michael Scherer is a national political reporter. If you're tuning in via Post Reports, we'll keep bringing you these conversations most Fridays, but you'll be able to hear more from Aaron and our other colleagues by also following the Campaign Moment show feed itself. That's where we are dropping extra episodes, and you'll definitely want to look that up because Aaron had a fascinating conversation about early voting this week. And there's going to be more episodes in the coming days, so be sure to look up the Campaign Moment podcast wherever you are listening. Today's episode was produced by Eliza Dennis and Laura Benshoff. It was mixed by Sam Bair and edited by Reena Flores. Thanks to Tom Simonite. Our team includes Maggie Penman, Monica Campbell, Ted Muldoon, Alana Gordon, Lucy Perkins, Ariel Plotnick, Bishop Sand, Rennie Svirnovsky, Sabby Robinson, Emma Talkoff, Sean Carter, Peter Bresnan, Allison Michaels, Renita Jablonski, and Martine Powers. I'm Elahe Izadi. Have a great weekend.